All right, so multiple targets came off the board for Oklahoma. And as an Oklahoma fan, you're probably wondering what's going on, what's the strategy, because when you have a small board of targets and multiple targets come off that board, you feel like Oklahoma's chances of being able to put together a top 10 class start to dwindle. Now, in 2026, it's no surprise. It's going to be a little bit slower of a year for Oklahoma because it's a prove it year for Brent Venables, right? All the schools are recruiting against BV. They're recruiting against him in the way that he might not be there next year. Now, they might be wrong because there's a good chance, as Jay told me yesterday and kind of reminded me, BV's probably going to be here another 2 years unless he just goes out there and loses, or only wins 5 games. But at the end of the day, recruits are being negatively recruited to not come to Oklahoma. Go there, Brent Venables might not be there. That whole staff's going to change. And in terms, it's going to be a little bit slower for Oklahoma to get commits. It's prove it year. Now, you've seen targets come off the board. Caden Jones, Jonathan Hatton. What's Oklahoma doing at running back? Obviously, there's the ever-changing story of what's going on at quarterback for Oklahoma because you're recruiting Bo Bentley, got Jaden O'Neal. We'll kind of touch on that. And then I think there's some good news coming up for Oklahoma. It's maybe in the month of April at the wide receiver position. So we're going to talk about that as well. Before we do that, though, as always, I want to hear from y'all. Join the discussion. Jump in the comments below. Give me your thoughts. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you guys hit that like and you hit that subscribe button. Listen, we're covering recruiting content all off season long. And listen, as I've gotten healthier, getting over the coughs and the colds and everything else, we're going to start putting out more content again. So make sure you guys are plugged in here. It's completely free. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button. But I think the narrative, where we got to start this video today, is the fact that Oklahoma only has 4 commits in this class. You could have had 5 if Jonathan Hatton would have stayed locked in, but he didn't. And right now, Oklahoma lost 2 of their top running back targets on their board. And quite frankly, one of them was due to NIL, and whether or not you believe Oklahoma should have paid the NIL money to an in-state kid, KD Jones is now off the board for Oklahoma. He goes to your rival school in Oklahoma State, and now Oklahoma's kind of got to shift their strategy a little bit. And it's going to be interesting to see how Oklahoma pivots here, because earlier in the month, you also lost Jonathan Hatton to Texas A&M, which is really intriguing to me because I got a chance to sit down with a recruit last night and his family for about 3 hours. And we were just sitting there chatting it up, talking. And one of the things we brought up was how A&M has not developed at the running back position with Reuben Owens, right? You know, you've seen Texas A&M go out here and lane great classes, get great players, but they haven't been able to develop them. So it was interesting to see Jonathan Hatton pick the Aggies over Oklahoma when Jonathan Hatton was being told, hey, if you go to Oklahoma, there's a good chance Brent Venables and DeMarco Murray aren't there in a couple of years, right? Because Brent Venables is on a prove-it year. And so you kind of look at the running back board for Oklahoma. I know Davian Gross is listed as a running back, but he's more of like a wide receiver. And as I've said many times, more of a Deebo Samuel guy. Yes, a guy that can line up in the backfield, but a guy that's primarily going to play wide receiver and a guy that you can utilize like that, like as a Swiss Army knife. So I wouldn't necessarily classify him 100% as a running back, especially somebody that Oklahoma's going to recruit at the running back position. But you look at guys that Oklahoma was previously going after before, like a Javian Osborne, right? Does Oklahoma maybe kind of circle back around to him and try to see if they can rekindle that relationship where it kind of feels like Michigan is going to come out ahead there? Or is Oklahoma going to go out there and have to hand out new offers? I think that's where this is probably going to more end up happening. Oklahoma's going to go after, have to make more offers, make late pushes, get kids on campus for that Champion Barbecue, which is one of your biggest official visit weekends. But if you're the Oklahoma Sooners, you're really just wondering, like, are they going to pivot more towards the portal? Because, I mean, although the running back room is deep right now, you're going to lose probably 2 guys this offseason. Javonte Barnes being one of them, maybe Gavin Sawchuk. Sam Franklin's going to be out of eligibility as well. So this running back room could have a lot of turnover, and where, yes, you might want to take at least one guy in the portal, you're going to want to get a couple of younger guys off the recruiting trail as well. So going to be really interesting to see how Brendan Venables, DeMarco Murray, and Ben Arbuckle really shift their focus here. Obviously, Rylan Morris is still on the table to potentially flip from Baylor, but as an Oklahoma fan, just got to keep your eyes on it. Now, wide receiver, I kind of teased this at the beginning. Is there good news coming for Oklahoma, right? Because we need some good news. Because the last wide receiver news we got was that Daniel Odom is going to take other visits to Washington and a couple other schools. And it feels like that Daniel Odom is potentially on flip watch. Now, I'll say this. I think as long as Jaden O'Neal's in the class, I think you have a pretty good shot at keeping Daniel Odom committed, right? There's a relationship there. I think that's kind of why Daniel Odom is committed in this class. And so as long as you're able to keep Jaden O'Neal on board, I think you keep Daniel Odom on board. Now, Mason James is the wide receiver that we got to talk about. The in-state kid out of Norman North, top 200 player in the entire country. Obviously, another guy that is pretty familiar with Jaden O'Neal. I believe they talk quite often. And a guy that Jaden O'Neal, by no surprise, has publicly been out there in his recruitment to get Mason James on campus for Oklahoma. In a recent interview with Chad Simmons, where kind of Chad Simmons put it out there talking with Mason James, it sounds like through a couple of spring visits to schools like Notre Dame, Washington, Missouri, Texas, that maybe a decision could be coming soon. And that's exactly what James said. He says, a decision can come sooner than I thought. And maybe that's the irony there, sooner, right? Because you look at Mason James being one of the top targets in this class for Oklahoma, especially at the wide receiver position for Emmett Jones. The relationship there is really tight. And obviously being right down the road, that's what you expect. And so potentially by the end of April, like you could see Mason James on board. And that could be 2 wide receivers committed in this class. And that's, I think, in my opinion, I think that's what you're looking for, because you really needed to have a strong showing in this class at the wide receiver position, because it was so bad last year, not because the guys weren't good enough, but because you had a bunch of true freshmen. You needed to build some more depth in that room to sustain kind of some injuries like this. And you obviously had some guys leave. And so you've got guys that are on some eligibility that could be running out over the next couple of years. And so getting some younger guys in like this, having a bigger wide receiver class, maybe of 4 or 5 guys, could be what Oklahoma looks to do. But Mason James, obviously a target that if you're an Oklahoma fan, you really want him to land here. He's got an official visit set for Oklahoma on June 20th, one for Washington on June 6th, Missouri on May 30th, and Arizona State on May 2nd. So we're going to have to keep our eyes on Mason James and see what's going on there. But lastly, we've talked a lot about, Jaden O'Neal and his connections in this class, trying to get people committed in part to be in Oklahoma's class. And Jaden O'Neal in this saga recruiting him is really interesting because, obviously, like I said, like Oklahoma's pushing for Bo Bentley. And it really feels like in the push for Bo Bentley that Ben Arbuckle does not see Jaden O'Neal as his guy. But the irony here is Jaden O'Neal has stuck through an offensive coordinator change. He's stuck through a bad season for Oklahoma, and he's sticking right now through an offensive coordinator that's recruiting over him. And so you look at it and you say, what are the possibilities that we keep Jaden O'Neal? I think the chances are high, especially if Bo Bentley doesn't end up in the class. But if Bo Bentley ends up in the class, the writing's on the wall, right? You're going to look at schools like a Georgia or a Colorado for Jaden O'Neal, right? 2 schools where they've heavily pursued him. I think there's some decent relationships out there. But at the end of the day, if you're an Oklahoma fan, although Bo Bentley can maybe give you a little bit of flash being a dual threat quarterback, you look at Jaden O'Neal with the pro-style arm. You look at Jaden O'Neal with his ability to escape the pocket if he needs to, and say, with a little bit of fine-tuning, Jaden O'Neal could be the better prospect long-term. And you look at what Ben Arbuckle did with Cam Ward, it could be a very similar situation with Jaden O'Neal. And so I want fans to understand that you're going to see a lot of stuff on social media, but I wouldn't be so quick to jump on this guy's gone and this guy's coming here, or Oklahoma's going to go 0 for 2, because at the end of the day, you just don't know. You're not in those rooms. You're not in those conversations. But I do think there's still a decent chance for Oklahoma to keep Jaden O'Neal. Oklahoma fans get an opportunity to show love to Jaden O'Neal by showing up to Mustang to watch those games, packing that house. And it's something that if you're an Oklahoma fan, I expect you to do just like we did for Kevin Sperry. So make sure you guys jump in the comments below, join the discussion. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you guys hit that like and you guys hit that subscribe button.